lasts. So if, you know, a tree that's grown in the middle of an open field and it gets reasonable amount of precipitation and there's enough soil fertility, may live for 400 years. If we plant that same species of plant, even a clone of the one that's growing in that field in a downtown lot, we might be 5 years. And that's just because it will exhaust all the available space and resources that it has. We can change how long it lives by giving it or supplementing those resources, but part of that was the discussion with redoing, redoing the streetscape. And one of those things we were going to do was address the irrigation, and so that would help in some ways, but we don't deal with space constraints where we need to have enough soil to support the plant, and that doesn't sound like it's going to get better. That's a problem we're always going to have. You have to have lots of soil space for the root system, which is half the plant. Right? We only see the top, which is the trunk and the leaves, but you got to have functioning roots for any of those other parts to work. And if we don't allow that space, we really just can't grow a tree. And so we run out of that space very quickly. A tree grows to its maximum size. That size is limited by whatever sidewalk square you have, and then it eventually starves out and dies, and we start over again. And there's a kind of a continuum where it may be most cost effective to let them grow until they're 15 years old and then replace them and just plant on that. But none of them are going to be a permanent fixture. When we talk about older trees in cities, it's usually in areas that are more affluent, where there's big tree lawns, the area between the sidewalk and the road. You think about like Detroit with the elm trees. It was in the areas that had large front lawns that could afford the upkeep. And then as you got closer to the center of the city and there were a lot more smaller houses close together, you had fewer of those boulevards and things that would be good for trees and better for turf or other small things. So, I mean, spaces is really our limiting factor. Unless we can find a way around that, we're really going to have problem growing trees.
If I could add something to that too, the current tree bases, I think, are 30 inches by 40.
In some places are
smaller than that, yes. So the new ones will be standardized with these 4-foot tree grades, which will give them a bigger tree pit. It's also going to help with compaction. You won't have people, walking across the planting bed compacting the soil, so that'll help the trees as well. And then, as he said, we would look at redoing the sprinklers at that time too. So part of the problem though is our sidewalks, are they like 9 to 10 feet wide, or something like that?
They're shorter. They're not as wide as a lot of other downtowns.
Yeah.
And you can tell when we are required to at least have a 6-foot clear walking space for pedestrians, and that's even pretty small. When you have 2 lanes of traffic. So the trees that have this 4 feet essentially to work with.
Yeah.
Toward the street. And then as Ben looked at other space issues that we're looking at, doors, parking, parking spots, so doors don't hit them, then street signs that we have requirements,
Right.
MDOT has requirements, fire hydrants, loading, there's just a bunch of different things that conspire, I guess I'll use that word, together to make trees in downtown Main Street difficult to manage and to grow into these larger canopy trees that you see in some older and wealthier communities.
When we did choose species, though, we did try to choose species that aren't the monster ones that would grow into the buildings in 5 years. So, if you think of let's say a sugar maple that can easily get to be 30, 40 foot wide, that is not a tree we can use.
But where we did look at, those large canopy trees or larger ones is West Main Street, when we accepted that donation from Fennec for, was it 20? I forget how many trees we got, but 28 swamp white oak trees that will grow into that, and there's more space for them and less conflict between people and stuff. So we do have that vision there of having this. It'll probably take 15, 20 years before those get any 60 years, as Ben says, before those get that same.
I mean, in one way we can fight like urban heat islands and hot spaces too, is to add our canopy in areas where we have space, Patrick. So we're looking at a really wide open park. We could put more trees there and worry less about places where we have to have a lot of people funneled through the trees. I mean, there's really a lot of conflict. We've got humans and plants close together because we're really not geared for that. I mean, we have to have safety by signage. We have to have unobstructed walkways. You know, we have to make sure that it's friendly to different types of footwear, people are wearing flip flops or heels, like those things are all important. And then we gotta make compromises all the way around that. And so, you know, one of the things that we keep talking about is trying to have more of the open space where we've got the space to have larger trees, because that's a place where we can make a lot of headway in our canopy establishment.
So maybe it doesn't, I'm gonna be the bad person, maybe it doesn't make sense to have trees in those 3 blocks of downtown or 2 blocks of downtown. I'm just
Yeah.
throwing that out because there are a lot of conflicts down there and there's also, I'm putting my council hat on, there's a lot of expense to doing it down there. If we've got to replace everything every, let's say 12 years even, you know, there's a lot of expense to that. So does it make sense to do that in those couple of blocks that are really busy? Whereas in Holy Childhood, West Main, there's a lot more open space there. I mean, we've got parks and we've got lawns. Maybe we need to look at doing something different in those couple blocks of downtown. Actually, when you said rolling things in, I was thinking about down at the, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the boathouse downtown.
Mhm.
They have huge planters in there. Jamie plants them and I planted them. And they, you know, in the winter they're gone and in the summer they're there and it gives it there's a lot of green in there. I'm not saying I love the look of that for Main Street downtown, but I think we need to consider, is that a wise place to put trees for those couple of blocks?
Well, and I think this is why we had started to look at, you know, let's do it with fewer trees. I really think we need to break up all the hardscape and pavement downtown. I feel very strongly about it. I think from a human standpoint, you know, just an inviting standpoint, you know.
Is there something
Make it
different than
attraction.
trees in the ground that we can do? I don't know.
If I could interject though too, we're using the word tree to mean this huge variety of plants, right? Like, and it doesn't have to be a large Norway maple, and it doesn't have to be, you know, like a bird's nest spruce. I mean, there are lots of different options there. I really have to like concur with what Dan is saying, which is that, you know, for aesthetics and the attractiveness of Harbor Springs, if we go to hardscapes, I mean, it makes you feel like you're in an industrial lot in Southern Michigan. I mean, like having some plants, I think, is why people want to come to Harbor. If we have to replace trees every 12 years, that's still just, it's like painting the side of a house. I mean, if you buy a dog, the cheapest thing you're gonna do is buy that dog. Everything after that, feeding it, watering it, taking it to the vet, will
I
exceed
get
that cost by a
Well,
long,
a tree
long shot.
installed is $500, right? Thereabouts. And so
Yeah, I mean, it'll
it's
be
the same
more.
thing with the city's budget for flowers, you know, $500 for flowers, you know, every year.
I think a tree will take up less space than planters. And so like if we're trying to pick the lesser of two evils where we get, you know, most of our criteria met, a tree in a planting square is gonna take up a lot less space, have a lot better effect on things like air quality, on temperature, on stormwater management than a planter will, and it will obstruct traffic flow a lot less. I mean, planters have a huge footprint, and whatever the footprint is that's what they have. At least with trees, we can work with that a little bit.
Teresa, do you have an opinion on all this?
Well, I see the value in breaking up the concrete, that hardscape that's down there, and I love trees. But I do see the value in less is more. And somebody mentioned maybe hanging plants, and I mean, think about the communities you go into that have those hanging plants. You drive into town, Charlevoix is one of them, yeah. You drive into those towns and you're like, wow, this is just beautiful. And they still have the trees.
Mhm.
So I do like the idea of having some trees, but maybe it would
Not
be
so
wise to have fewer trees and try to incorporate some other greenery and.
And I'm
into
not
that.
anti-trees downtown. I just
Right.
needed to throw that out
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
we keep coming back to, well, the grades cost a lot of money and watering costs and maintenance does. And so I think we, like Patrick has introduced, we just need to think outside the box a little of how can we still be beautiful downtown and environmentally be responsible, but without it, let's get something done, you know, because the financial part of it is slowing us down a lot.
So I was gonna gather from this is that we probably won't be able to attain that look on those 3 blocks of Main Street that come with some of those, as you were mentioning, wealthier, older communities that had more space to work with. And I don't think we'll be able to achieve that on Main Street for those 3 blocks.
I think that
Those large canopy trees that are hanging over.
we may be able to do that in areas where some of the shops have single story and they're pulled back. But we don't have very much
If
of
they're
that.
not built up to the setback line.
Yeah, and what we're probably gonna see is a lot of that.
So where we see those already are on the entrance to town, the residential section of
Right.
Main Street, right?
Yeah, it's a nice canopy. over-
Yeah, so and then once you get to down, and I get what Patrick's getting at, you know, you get to the next blocks of the central downtown, and you got these skinny little trees that, you know, barely have any canopy on it.
Mhm.
So can we do much better than that is a question, and
That would be hard.
Can I-
And
Can I pipe in
again,
here?
yes,
Can I,
let's try.
I just have something to say here. It seems to me that since this is actually supposed to be led by DDA, maybe the next step would be to meet again with Spargo and kind of talk this through again, because it was my understanding this was pretty much a done plan. And the next step was to figure out how we could move forward on it. So if we need to revise it, I think we need to work with Margot once again and take another look at it. I understand what everyone is saying here. It makes a lot of sense to me. Maybe there's another alternative to there were 18 trees, I believe, on the plan. Maybe there's another way to do it. But I think right now, since it's supposed to be led by them, we're kind of premature in trying to redesign it.
well, I don't know if
And
we're,
also,
Karen, I don't know if we're trying to redesign, it. I think we're just trying to have a discussion here about what our vision is. Yeah, so, I don't
I
know.
think we need to include Margot as part of that discussion.
Well, I'd like to propose that we have a joint meeting with DDA sometime. You know, and
Yes.
if there's no money for this project, even to do engineering drawings, and I guess, Victor, what do you think about that with fewer trees? I mean, if there's no money to do the drawings and then there's no money to
If the money,
build it,
the
you
money
know,
to
then
do
is
this
there any
right now-
point doing it right now?
the money to do this right now would have to come from the DDA. So, I would not advocate any general fund money used for this plan. We already have a plan that's in place. If we want to alter that plan, I would say the DDA should take that up from their financial perspective, but, if you guys want to have a joint meeting with the DDA, I don't know if this is, the time is right now to do it sooner than later, or,
I just listened to the last DDA meeting. I'm trying to remember. They were gonna come to council in September or October. Was their next year's plan?
yeah, their
right?
next DDA. plan.
So they've kind of finalized that next, and I don't remember any discussion about the tree grades in it. Don't quote me on that, because I've watched lots of meetings, but, you know, they've met with their, what they're doing with their dollars.
Well, that'd be good to find out. Maybe
Yeah,
they've
yeah.
decided that it should be a city project, not a DDA project. I don't know.
And where are we at with grant applications on their end? I mean, I know there's grants available for Main Street revitalization projects with MEDC. Is that up to Margot to
That's
pursue those?
Yep,
That's a Margo question.
yep, that's for Marco.
Yeah. You know, it might be worth
You wouldn't
talking
have
talking
to do
further
that.
about it. Might be worth
Yeah.
trying to get some funds, even if it's just $20,000, like Boyne City's managed to do.
I just think it's important, I agree with Patrick, this is Nancy, obviously, to have an overall plan. We tend to do a lot of plugging of holes around here, and I think it would be great to have a vision, which can be altered down the road, but to have, what are we trying to look like downtown? That's realistic. Yeah, it'd be lovely, like the old southern towns with beautiful, huge, big canopy. That's not gonna happen downtown here, from what Ben said in a lot of other ways. So I don't know if DDA is tuned into that at all, but it sounds like it's something that needs to be done in conjunction with each other.
I think they're very tuned in. You know, another idea that we've just touched on briefly at Tree Board before is maybe it'd be nice for us to have a streetscape plan for the city. Like these corridors, we do want trees on. These corridors, there's too many wires, it's gonna be really difficult, you know. And then we've done this a little hit or miss, like you said, like where do we not have as many trees like Layton Park? And, you know, we had the project last year to add trees there.
But I think that's more, in my opinion, in line of what tree board should be focusing
Yeah.
on here, right, is, you know, not to say that we shouldn't meet with the DDA as a joint meeting, but I think our goal is to look at the overall vision and of the city and the streets and not so much, focus on, whether, DDA has it right in their choice of specifics for that plan. That is within their purview and, if they're gonna pay for it, it's kind of one of those things where like, yes, it's gonna go to council for approval, but I don't think that the plan that we have right now is bad with the DDA. I think they considered the lifespan of the trees, the height of the trees, interferences with pedestrian use and signage use and other conflicts. So I think from my personal opinion here is tree board perspective is let's start looking at all our streets and all our parks and start creating that vision for what we want them to look like. Maybe they already fit that mold. And maybe we want to start with the downtown and work our way out. But let's maybe get a plan together for that and start chipping away at it.
And what does our tree plan
Say
say
with regards
about
to-
it? Yeah, how do we
Good
relate
question.
it back
I have
to the
go
tree
look,
plan?
yeah.
I
Just like
can
the
bring
master
something for
plan
that.
and all of those.
I
Yeah,
can, for the
yeah.
next meeting, I can bring stuff for that.
So how can we relate it back? Because you guys spent a lot of time on that tree
Well,
plan.
maybe we need like a visual tree master plan, like these are the corridors that we want to
Would be
highlight
helpful.
with, whoop, overhanging canopy, and these we want to beautify, these are neighborhoods. Here's some open space where we want to increase canopy.
And this would take a lot of work also, when we talk about park space, working with the Parks Board and also not
Crossing.
taking away from
So
the
the
intended
parks-
use and space at those parks as well. So, I mean,
So the Parks Board would like to meet with tree board sometime too.
Well, that we all intersect.
We're
I
very
mean, all the
popular. Yeah.
committees.
we had a town hall meeting.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Sounds like I've inspired some more conversation, but maybe at a later date, we should
Yeah.
revisit this, so it sounds like we brought up a lot of things here. Yeah, and I'm in agreement.
I could start with, and I bet I could get a map from Jeff, just like a map of the city streets, and make some initial suggestions on what corridors there could be and what different treatments for different corridors. And let me do that.
Yeah, that sounds great to me.
Not,
And
not,
That'd be
indi-
great.
not individual trees at this point, just like
Just the
concepts.
overall concept of what,
And if I get this to work, we can.
anyway,
Yeah,
anyway.
Yeah, that'd be great, Deanna. That'd be great. So then we can look at that at the next meeting. I won't be at the next meeting. I can talk about that later, but I think that's a good idea. Then we can incorporate that into the tree plan at some point.
Well,
Or it can be a
Do an
separate.
update.
It could be just a separate, it doesn't need to be incorporated in the tree plan, it can just be a separate, because it's one of the goals in the tree plan to look at it, so we can
Right,
then
right.
check that off.
Yeah. No, I
I'd
think
like to
that's
thank
great.
Patrick for bringing this into focus, that we do need a tree master plan.
Right.
Who else?
It's a good idea.
And then Patrick did have some other old business, right,
That's true.
Patrick?
Yeah,
That would probably be, that's where we are right now.
okay, so we'll move on from that. Great. So,
So that's our next step then. Anna, you'll bring some ideas to the next meeting?
Yeah, we will,
What do you
yeah,
think?
all
Is
right.
that good?
Yep, and Patrick has some other old business he wants to talk about really quickly before we move.
yeah, thank you, sorry.
No, it's okay.
That's fine.
So last month I was not here, and then under the old business, under the zoning ordinance, you talked about two different issues there.
Mhm.
And with the last issue, talking about landmark historic trees, and there's a lot there to pull apart. But I just wanted, as I understood it, I wanted to disagree because it sounded like you had an agreement with everybody. And I wanted to disagree that the city should consider a voluntary historic tree program instead of regulation.
Yes.
So as a recap, so I think I brought that up as two, like, as Patrick said, two potential ordinances. And the ordinance that I looked at too was a voluntary, where someone could volunteer a landmark tree on their property. And then the city would, require a zoning permit to change or remove that tree. And then the tree board recommended against having that as an ordinance because one is, should the city be really managing what's happening on someone else's property in that sense, and should the city be overseeing that? So, so Patrick, you're disagreeing with what the tree board decided to
Yes.
do? Okay,
Yeah,
just want to make sure with this.
And as I understood that, this was talking about future historic tree status.
Yes.
Okay, so just to tag on, I just thought that if a tree is determined historic, should be left to property owners to voluntarily decide its fate, or should a greater community benefit from that historic status? And I had to go and look up the historic definition, and from Wikipedia, a heritage tree is typically a large individual tree with unique value, which is considered irreplaceable. So it seems like we should consider the community here, if we're talking about irreplaceable and you're allowing things to go away. As a community, as a tree board, this is what we should be standing up for the greater community. Heritage trees, you don't want those to go away, and you wouldn't seem, you would allow an individual to make those decisions, seemed to me. So that was my reason for my disagreement.
And we're talking
So
about,
I just want to kind of talk a little bit about that. I was going to bring it up under the September tree canopy article. We talked about it in the last week, Patrick, and I think the feeling was we're putting so many regulations on people, but what I was going to suggest we do is look at creating a link or something on the Harbor Springs website to encourage people to go and see the heritage and landmark trees that have been identified around town, to give them an appreciation, really more for a point of information rather than regulation. We're just afraid we were putting too much on, the individual homeowners, to allow us to regulate how they protect the trees. I understand what you're saying, Patrick, but I think it might be a little bit more difficult to manage and also to cite problems with. So right now, our current article will not be about the heritage trees. It will be about the
Champion trees.
The champion trees, which is kind of part of heritage, but it speaks to the tallest tree in the species in a community. The next article will be about heritage trees. And that is something that could incorporate a potential link to the City of Harbor Springs website. If the tree board agrees that we do not want to have property owners regulated.
so my concern, and you guys know this about me, but on the city property, I have no problem. If the city decides they want to make a historic tree that's not going to get cut, I'm 100% fine with that. On private property, I'm not, because I can foresee a whole lot of issues. Someone comes in and buys a piece of property, they want to put a home up on it or change a home. We already have lots of regulations that they have to deal with. And I think for us to say on a piece of private property, you can't cut that tree down, I'm gonna always struggle with that. I just don't think that's what the city tree board should be doing.
And if we incorporate something on the website, we would encourage people who have heritage trees to maintain and save them, appreciate them. And maybe by doing that, it would encourage them not to do anything harmful to them or remove them, at some point if they sell the property.
Well, is this something that we want to put back on the agenda, or are we for a future meeting, or to discuss? I'm talking about to discuss further what Karen here is talking about, what we can be doing for heritage trees. I think the tree board already said no to recommending a regulation for private property, but maybe we want to revisit what we can do as far as informational, educational,
Right,
and stuff like that. We can put that in a future agenda.
right.
Yeah, I think that would be.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Just because it wasn't planned for today. and-
Yeah, no, but that's good. We should, Patrick wasn't here and
Yeah.
obviously he feels strongly about it, so I think we should.
Appreciate your input there, Patrick. It is really relevant. We want to protect those trees as much as we can. But first, we got to educate people on what they are, what they're about. I wonder if some people don't even know they have a tree.
Oh, I'm
You
sure,
know, they can
I'm sure they
consider a
don't.
landmark tree.
I'm glad you brought up, excuse me, landmark tree as well, and I just wondered about inviting the indigenous population into some of these conversations about when some of these trees
Yes.
are designated, if we'd invite them in as well, and then the importance and significance of some of these trees.
You're so right on that. There's a tree on Summit Street between Ann and Sargent that is a tree that was used to mark a pathway with Native people many, many years ago. There's a lot of interesting history there, so I think it's a really good point, that tree.
Okay, yeah, we can add that to future agenda. All
Good.
right. Karen, we're ready to move on to the next item.
Yeah.
You're ready.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
under new business now, I just finished on the tree canopy article I just started on it, then we'll go back to the DTI Foundation, DTE.
Okay.
Yeah, so Dennis completed an article on the champion trees, and that'll be in this month's issue. I just gotta put, the tree canopy logo on the top and so on. I'll send it over to you Victor this afternoon. And then we talked about, Dan and I talked about the next article being on heritage and landmark trees for September.
With there being quite a bit of overlap between the two, actually, yeah.
Right. We're just kind of continuing that education of what kind of trees we have in our area. If you all agree with that.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay,
Thanks, Karen. And
okay, so back to DTE Foundation.
yes, all right, so this is just really quick and more informational right now than, than making a request, but so I met several months ago, someone with the DTE Foundation, and they said, hey, if you ever have events or projects that you're looking to do, just shoot us an email, we'll love to sponsor something. So I talked with Lucas, and as you know, we are, because of our infrastructure in front of Bay Bluffs and the skate park, the interference with the utility lines, we're gonna remove those pine trees because of the interference with
Where
the.
you're going, yeah.
Yeah, so I reached out to DT and said, hey, could we, we want to replant trees there, but we don't want to replant trees that are gonna grow and interfere with the utilities. So they said that they would, 20 trees they would provide us with. And we already met with Relief to talk about a potential planting date, which would be October 8th. And they said they would supply everything, we would just need to supply again, volunteers like we did last time. And Lucas would have some DPW guys there. So right now, what I'm really doing is talking with Lucas to see, all right, can we even get those trees
Just because, can we get those down?
removed? He's been contacting contractors left and right, and many have passed on removing them because some of them are just so tall. And the good thing from us, from a financial point of view, is this is really not general fund, it's mostly electric fund, because that's really the concern. The trees is gonna damage our electric power lines. But if all goes well, that is our first location. Let's say though, we can't get a contractor to remove those trees, then Lucas and I wanna have a backup location. So if all goes well, either way, October 8th will be a tree planting day in the city with in-kind donations. But my, I guess, question from you is something that the tree board is willing to do is volunteer, and at least if we get a student member, we can maybe get the NHS involved again. But the second thing is, what should our backup location be? We were thinking about it and we're like, well, what street? This goes along with the vision, right? We need a vision, but I'm trying to think of a backup location that can, because they don't want to do 2, 3, 4 separate locations when they do this planting, Relief and DTE. They just want one location. So, they don't have to jump from place to place. So
Do we get to say what trees there?
we're gonna review that with Lucas and Ben when we meet up, because we need species that are very, I guess, that aren't gonna interfere with our utilities there. So I can come back, but we have to do this really quick. So I have to meet with Ben. Ben doesn't even know about this yet. So I have to meet with Ben and Lucas.
Catch me if you can.
Yeah.
Does it
Exactly.
have to does that 20 tree donation have to be done in October? Or say, could it be done later on if we can't get those?
We had 2 dates. They had one in September and one in October.
Okay,
And
Okay.
so we picked October because it's a later
Yeah.
date.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So
So,
who, this is DTE that said those 2 days?
yeah, DTE with relief. This is, they want to do a fall planting and that's when they're available to have their staff, oversee it, right?
Okay.
So they want to order the trees soon. So I guess obviously, species recommendations, I think I can get from Ben on what will go there. I mean, we can also talk really quickly if there's any tree recommendations from your point of view, but
But
also,
where would we put 20 trees? in
what
one
other place would we put?
Except there.
Victor's
Yeah, and then I think we need to discuss, right now, there's evergreen trees there. Do we want a whole wall in front of Bay Bluffs again? Because they're gonna start out looking like a wall. And I guess I would say maybe not, maybe to go with deciduous trees this time. And I just don't know what a row of crab trees would look like there. And
I
then,
don't think they're gonna do a monoculture anyway, so.
no, I know,
that's right.
I'm just thinking like, it does seem like maybe small shade trees would be the way to go.
shade
Are we
trees
gonna put
and
all 20
utility
in front of Bay Bluffs or? is it
Well,
opportunity?
then we did put quite a few swamp white oaks under the wires.
They all
on Main
have to
Street.
be
Those
planted in one
I mean,
place,
those are
Karen.
not
All in
high
one
energy
place.
Yeah,
wires.
yeah.
So like, if we touch a phone line, it's okay. If we touch a jagged
So
line, it's
they're gonna
okay.
help
But
us
if
with
we touch
the
a transmission line or
line
primary, that's bad.
planting.
So it's a different
Yeah.
type of wire.
I've got two
Sorry, we have two people going
Yeah,
on.
I got two
Karen.
conversations going on.
Okay, well, we're gonna have no monoculture, so we experienced that same thing with the spillway here, so we looked at a bunch of species. We'll look at species that don't create some sort of wall. I mean, they're gonna break it up, we're probably have, it's not just in front of Bay Bluffs, it'll also be in front of the skate park a little bit, because, so it's gonna be along that route. I
Is any
think,
of that utility gonna change if the switch goes up on?
No.
So that line will still be the same line, same voltage requirements?
I don't know about that.
Will the line go higher?
I don't know, the line won't get higher, I don't know if there'll be more lines added to that, the poles.
Do we know how high the wire is that we need to stay under?
That's actually a good question.
I think the wire is at 60 feet, I wanna say there, and
And
Lucas and
that's
I,
based on standard, right? Like the height recommendation is by how much voltage it carries or the size of the wire or something.
I think we were trying to look at trees that get no more than 30 feet. So,
We got a long time for 30 feet,
yeah,
so.
All right.
How big are these trees going to be that will be planted? I'm missing.
No more than 30, no more than 30 feet.
Or maybe we
Yeah,
could
yeah.
say 40 feet.
Well, I gotta get double
Some light
confirmation.
trimming, up at the top.
But we also don't wanna make our more maintenance than necessary for those trees.
If it only gets to be 40 feet, they aren't gonna be big limbs up there. It's just gonna be twigs.
So where would another site be though, except there? You guys know the city
A
better.
backup site, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I would love to talk about State Street between 119 and Lake.
On one side.
Well, unless we did like, crabs or something smaller on the other side.
I don't know if we can fit 20.
Wires.
I was thinking.
So we also could do where we could split it up between Ann Street, so
But we
major
can't split it.
thoroughfare.
It all has to be. in
Well,
one
if Ann Street is,
side.
Ann Street's a few streets away.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But I thought you said we had to plant them all in one.
Yeah.
that's what they're requesting.
That's what they're requesting.
And then how tall will these young trees be, is what my question.
They're gonna be what we planted along the spillway, probably similar to what we already have, probably between 8 and 12 feet. Right,
Gotcha.
more about
Yeah,
how.
So what do you need from us right
They're
now?
already trying to get the small ball.
An idea of it, and an idea of a spot that would work if the Bay Bluff trees aren't down yet.
Okay,
And I can't.
I'm trying to think.
yeah, I like the idea of state.
I mean, and something that could be done soon, right? We can't I know we talked about the substation project and all this, but it's something that has to be done,
Now,
yeah.
basically.
Or we can say, no, we don't want the grant, but I'd rather take the trees, the free trees.
Yeah, I know.
If
We've
we can-
also said that let's not put trees in that we can't take care of, or, that it's
Yeah.
not the right spot.
So that's why this is the right spot. I mean, but this spot right here in front of Bay Bluffs is the right spot because we're just replacing existing trees,
What about
essentially.
across the street? I mean, we've had some stuff come out of the park there. Along the hillside on the.
Right directly across from Bay Bluff. What is
It
it
would be a
called?
shame
Tourist
not to
park.
building.
There are
it'd be a
so
shame
many
not to use
trees
them on-
there.
On Bay, in front of Bay Bluff. I mean, if they're gonna take, if we gotta take the trees down, it's a shame not to put the replacement trees there, I think.
It's just the timing,
It's a
it's a
time.
timing issue to get the old
Yeah.
ones out.
Ben,
I
you can't
understand
squeeze
that.
this into your schedule?
Come on, Ben.
Come on, Ben.
Come on, Ben.
Seriously.
We got through the hands up by myself.
Mm,
I mean, I think we should just wait until they come down and then plan, and DTE would be willing to go out further with us. It's
I
just a
guess I
shame not to
agree.
Put the trees
Okay.
there.
I'll bring that up to them and saying if they're willing to do it, what it might have to
We're
do
still
in
gonna have
spring.
to, we're still gonna have to replace those trees. when
Doesn't
they come down.
DTE trim too?
This is, these are our lines. That they trim when it's their line.
And our electric department can't do it. I know they trim.
They do trim. I prefer to them have less work to do than to
You
trim
know,
trees.
if we
that
get in
they-
a pinch, you know, let's say Ben could do half of them and the electric department could do half.
Take them down,
Take them
though?
down.
That's
They're
different
huge.
than trimming though.
Are you talking about to take the existing trees down?
Yeah.
No, we need a contract. You get, they might even have to close a State Street off of that. Yeah, no, Main Street.
How many trees are there?
A couple dozen at least.
Yeah.
I forgot the last.
They're the great big huge
Yeah.
pines.
Stick that out the door and count.
I know I'm trying to,
Yeah, to
Sure, but I
visualize,
can't.
there's a
Yeah,
bunch of
they're,
them.
If you drive by the skate park and up Bay Bluffs, you'll
There are a
see them on
bunch
the.
of them.
yeah.
At first I got kind of upset, but then they're kind of rough shape, really.
Well, and you just see basically the
And they're kind of, I think,
trunks
at the end of their life.
And one limb already came down and broke part of our fence a few months ago, several months ago, and one just barely missed our lines before that, so. It's pretty urgent for us to take them down, but for us right now, it's finding a contractor, and Ben knows those kinds of trees, there's probably not many contractors that are willing. Because there's all kinds of insurance requirements and liability requirements that you could get in trouble.
Did you talk to Mark Johansson?
Lucas is called around, I don't know if he's talked to Mark.
One of the problems you run into is that when you're that close to power, you have to have special certifications.
Yeah.
And like you'll find contractors in the area that will work around some of the lower voltage lines and they'll say, oh yeah, sure, fine, I can do that.
Those are big lines.
The higher they put the line, the higher the voltage and the potential for it to jump from the line to somebody working in a bucket truck, it's higher and higher. And so you have what's called minimum approach distance.
We
So
need
are
to
the
do
trees
what's-
into the high voltage line then right now?
Well, they're not within contact, but like somebody would be working in there just because of what you have to do. I think they go over the lines in
Yeah.
some places. So like you can't just lower things because that rope becomes an energized conductor that touches.
And then the road, again, another issue with
Yeah, we
the
got.
attic, the road might have to be closed, especially if, that's the easiest way is to chop them down, but if we don't close the road, if MDOT doesn't allow the road closure, then you gotta,
I don't know if they can say no, but we have to have a reasonable way to shut, like,
Shut,
move.
yeah.
I mean, we could run
People,
people
so
up
then
Lake
the-
Street.
then there's a cost, added cost of doing
Yeah.
traffic. Anyway,
Signage.
that's not heard, I do like what the comments I heard was, you know what, if we can't do the pine, if we can't remove the pine trees in the next month or so, unless the DTE will hold off
Would
to
give
spring
us-
planting.
Give us a range.
That is our
check on it.
best.
Yeah.
That is our
Yeah,
best
that's-
location.
But can we,
I'd like to do that.
can we take the trees and hold them? I mean, can we put them at like the top of a well house, and water them for the spring?
I think Relief will help us next year. They really liked working here with.
You'll
me.
Relief will help us, but this is the DTE grant, so it's up to DTE what they want to do. If
And
they're
they say
willing
that we
to-
could, you can get these trees now or not.
Then
Relief
I
is just,
come back to.
Relief is just working with, because DTE has contracted
Yeah.
with Relief, basically.
So I think if Victor, ask him
Yeah.
if we could do a rain check if we had to, as long as we,
Later in the fall or in the spring if necessary. I'll ask
wherever
them.
we could make it happen. I mean,
I
and if
can't-
they say no, then we'll have to regroup.
I can't think of another location where
I
we,
can't either for that many.
and we still do have trees that we can plant with that money that we recovered from, so we still have money for tree plantings, but,
It would be nice to do it that way, though.
yeah.
To take them down and put them right back would be
Yeah.
really nice.
Yeah.
Do you mind
So
if
it's I'm kind of missing part of the conversation again, but is it the deal that we can't find somebody to do it in time?
Yeah.
Or that we don't have the money? Okay, so.
No, we
it's
can't
the
find
availability of
somebody.
Somebody to cut it down, okay.
Yeah,
That's,
yeah.
all right. Yeah, if we get a rain check, that would be great.
Do you mind if I call Mark Johansson? He's kind of a.
No, I let Lucas knows what he needs from them, so yeah, he'll call them.
He's at my house right now.
Well, you should talk to him.
Make him some chocolate chip cookies or
Yeah.
something.
Margie, what-
Okay.
Thanks so much.
All right,
you can talk.
Is that good? You said
Yep.
is that what you need right now?
yeah, I have what I need, Karen.
All right.
I
So
think-
then, next meeting is September 16th. I will be in France, so I'm not gonna be on the call this time. I don't think I can be on Zoom on a bicycle. So I'll be absent, but you'll still have a quorum.
I'll also be gone.
Oh,
This is Teresa. Yeah, I'll be
Teresa,
out
okay,
of the country.
okay.
I think I'm here. I gotta have.
Whoa,
So
travelers.
we'll have a quorum with 3 people then, Victor?
Yeah, 3 people, as long
I'll
as,
double check.
yeah. And if not, we push it back, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay, yeah, I'll be home a week later.
Yeah.
So we'll have the 22nd of September.
Time to skip.
Victor, I have one thing that I would like to maybe propose for our next agenda, having to do with how to make the whole, trees on city property process easier for people.
What do you mean, which process?
Well,
We have
just
removal
every
or
parks
planting?
meeting we get an earful about, like how it months and months and months and nothing's happening and I don't know.
Well, see, people, you get earfuls, but people aren't telling you the whole story, so
Okay.
if they have an issue with the policy, they should go to council first.
Mhm.
We've relooked at that vegetation management policy several times. If they have an issue with a particular request, and I've gotten calls about that, we know what we need from the applicants making that request. If they don't give us the information we need to review it, for example, we were waiting on a survey for one of them for a year. So we never got a survey for them, so
Always more to this.
so we can't do anything. So I get it, people are upset, but that is a policy that's in place and I'm not gonna skirt that policy at all. So people are upset the way the bluff has looked and what happens on the bluff. We don't have the money to put in a plan. And if they want to change the process, go to council. Council can change that policy if they want. So I've been blunt with a lot of people who call me about this and they're like, well, the city needs to maintain the trees on the bluff. We have a policy in place and the policy was made through several years of going back and forth between people above the bluff and people below the bluff, arguing about whether those trees should be removed or should stay. Decades, I mean, since the 80s at least, so,
So they need to deal with council on it.
yeah.
I mean, if they're upset. It's a,
Parks Board's not the right place for it, and,
No, it's definitely not.
and then council, if the council wants to entertain it, I'll bring it back to the tree board for revision of that, but. I get a little frustrated with people who call me saying, well, you guys aren't doing what you're supposed to be doing with the trees on the bluff, and why is the process taking so long? That's the process that's in place, and if someone wants to remove a tree on the bluff because they want to improve their view, there's a complicated, lengthy process behind that, and that was there on purpose. And yes, the city may have done things a decade ago differently, but city changed the way it does things. And
Well, and
I don't,
I would also point out too, that we are one of the few municipalities that allow that. Like in other places, the answer would be no.
Yeah.
You know, you can do whatever you want to your tree, but city property belongs to all the taxpayers in the city, and if you don't like it, you're welcome to move. But I mean, we kind of hear this argument pretty consistently too with people that they want the city to take over what they want to have happen. Where they have a view, they think it's the city's responsibility to make it look the way that they want it to look, but they don't want to follow through with whatever those hurdles might be. And in this case, it's a one-page, it's a one-page application and a check. And then, being open and upfront about what they want to do and having a couple of meetings. I mean, so that this isn't like a background check or something like that. This is pretty streamlined, but they have to do it. So.
all right,
okay, great.
So I think,
we're all
there's
set.
something else, we're at adjournment time.
Yeah.
It's over.
2 minutes.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
That's pretty
That sounds
good.
Good.
My bad.
Yeah, thanks for the use of your phone.
You bet.
I don't know what happened, soon, but it normally works even so far, so.
Yep.
nevertheless.
Okay,
Thanks,
safe
Karen.
travels.
Safe travels.
Yeah, thank you.